knew where I was erring in first 5 or 6 years of my academic career. Only when I later came to understand, right, uh, this also amounts to plagiarism. Only then I realized, oh, this is a very important issue that which all these years have not catered to. Because what happens is, due to the hurry or due to the deadline pressure, what I generally used to do was, I was when somebody requested me for the article, second one, when somebody requested for the articles, I just went in to the old article, changed the title of the article, changed the introduction of that particular article, and then copied little from my own article and used to give it to them. And even organizers also many a times used to tell to me, "Sir, you please give me one article. We need it. That's all." And whether it is an unpublished, so to make it feel like unpublished, many a times in the early part of my career, I also have seen. If you check my CV, you can see at least some 4 or 5 articles with the different names, but with almost similar or a slightly different, only slightly different content. So that also will be a part of plagiarism. So that is the reason that when I was yesterday speaking about the review of literature in length, I thought, let me just in 10 to 15 minutes I'll cover this and then go to the other part of research study overview, research approaches, questionnaire design, and so on and so forth. The first important thing is, why exactly nowadays this plagiarism issue has become a very important issue. Earlier, this research ethics itself, as such, was basically with the medical science, right? It was with the medical science and medical research, basically, because they were dealing with the human trials. Even now, COVID-19, many companies are racing to find the vaccination and medicines for the COVID-19. What exactly happens at this point of time? First, they will do the trials on the animals, and then only with the due process after the approval of the government, they should try or they should have the human trials. But unfortunately, in many countries where the laws are not that strong, say in some countries of the Africa, or even in India, I've heard that they sometimes, do the human trials without taking the permission. So all this is unethical. So from there it started. Now, of course, thanks to the government of India stringent rules, now it's not that easy to do away with this in the medical research. But in the social science and the other researchers, now it is the plagiarism is still it is increasing. And despite this, majority of the times it is because that we are not unaware, we are unaware of what exactly plagiarism is, whether we are doing it, whether we are copying, even copying from our own work also resorts to plagiarism. Many of us do not know. And when then what exactly is the common property resource, even in the education, in the academics? Say, for example, which I'll be speaking about the Bannerghatta Zoo or Bannerghatta National Park. I will be speaking about the Bangalore. Then, if at all, if I speak of the weather of Bangalore, it's already there. So, does it amounts to plagiarism? What exactly is plagiarism all about? So, in the review of the just, I will not go in length because this is just for your kind information so that you understand how to differentiate this. And basically, what exactly is the content is, we do not know how exactly can in what is the time frame that we can just check the plagiarism in our articles. All this right now, there is no quick fix for it, because unless and until we make aware of each academician, each student about these issues, then it is highly impossible. And moreover, the pressure of the work, the pressure of the deadlines, all this add to the things, and they keep on going in the plagiarism issue. And but we should not do it. When we will not do, when we will understand that we should not, well, these are all plagiarism and we should not do it, then even if it is one article in 6 months, 3 months, 4 months, no issue, but it should be virginal, right? So what we should be doing, we should only, when those individuals who have the exposure, who have the training, what exactly is plagiarism, they will not do it. Definitely, they will not do it. And of course, how to prevent it, how to detect it, and how they're detecting that also. If you're aware of it, right, then definitely, even by conscience, we will see that we will not do plagiarism issue. And moreover, one should encourage the creativity too, right? What exactly happens with the integrity of the in the data, right? If at all, if my right now, all of you are aware of intellectual property rights, that even government of India is taking it very seriously, and it has enforced the intellectual property rights in this country also. And what exactly happens when there is no integrity in the among the individuals? They try to steal the others' work. They try to. There is a need for virginality, and they should respect the authorship. And so, because of all these reasons, right? Because of all these reasons. Uh, Nowadays, the plagiarism has become an important component of all the research methodology course, and they are trying to make the individuals, make the researchers aware where exactly they should stop. And even if they are trying to take, yesterday also we discussed issues, right, when we should take the direct quotations, right? If you feel, I also give the example, if you feel that this quotes only from that author is too good, right? If you're quoting that author, then invariably we should mention the quotation, and then you should take from that inverted commas, and then take from and quote that individual and source, and take from that particular source. And most importantly, this is for we should give the credit from when we are using the ideas, we are using the opinions, we are using the theories of some other person, right? Theories of the other individual. And moreover, paraphrasing the words, ideas, opinions is most important, right? Is most important, whether it is oral or even written. Once I was watching an interview in the television wherein he had just invented an omelette making machine, and he was interviewed in one of the television channels, and he was asked, how did you get this idea? Then he told, no, I was watching Mickey and Donald cartoons on the television, and I got this idea, and I just invented this. So, even giving due credit, he could have said, no, I was just experimenting on this. Usually we say, no, my mother was finding it very difficult, so I just thought of inventing it. No, all this concocting the stories is not required. Be very honest. Tell where exactly you got the idea from. To initiate, you should get some idea. So where was that source from? Tell it honestly. And that gentleman did give a fair amount of credit to the cartoon series, and he said, when he saw that, he got even furthermore ideas. Like he even told few more things that which he has got, but still he has not. No, has not invented all of them. So that this is how you should be very honest when you take the individual's ideas, opinions. You may be influenced, you may be reading some other article, you may feel, okay, I can write on this, but give due credit to that author. When I was reading this, I felt like, this also should be added to this, hence I wrote this article. So when we borrow the facts, when we borrow the statistics or illustrative material, we should always give the due credit to the original author. And apart from this, what are the different types of plagiarism? This is the most important thing that which all of us should understand. So first important thing is the ghost writer. There's somebody else will be writing, right? Somebody else will be writing on our behalf, or we will not cite the source, right? We will not cite the source. Both are the ghost writers only. Either somebody else will be writing on the behalf, or you will be not citing the source from where you are taking that particular source. Without citing the source, right? Without citing the source, they will be just copying, but it will be detected. Now we have a good number of softwares which I'll be telling you. Then it is the photocopy. The photocopy is just whatever it is, without changing anything, you just take off everything. You say it will be research will be done on the agriculture crisis in Bangalore rural. Then we'll be doing the agriculture crisis in Tumkur, or agriculture crisis in one of the districts in Punjab. Just if we do that, this is the photocopy of it. Just changing the districts is exactly what we call it as photocopy. And then there is a patch writing, or the potluck paper, right? Potluck paper. It is where exactly the writer tries to disguise his plagiarism by copying from different sources. Yesterday I was telling you, at least you should read some 100 reviews, more than 100 reviews, and then start writing your review of literature. So many of the researchers also use this. They take some 100, 150 books, and they take one paragraph from one book, second paragraph from another, so that it will not be easily caught. So that is how they do. The writer tries to disguise the plagiarism by copying from the different sources, and sometimes tweaking the sentences to make them fit together, because the paragraphs will be altogether different. Some will be so clever that they will be, even when they will be doing the patch writing, they will be seeing that the continuity from each paragraph also will be there. But even then, that also amounts to plagiarism. Then the another one is the poor disguise, right? Poor disguise. So here, the writer has retained the essential content of the source, but he or she has altered the manuscript appearance slightly by changing the keywords and phrases. So what exactly they do here is, is, was, these kinds of things. And when they say some 30 years back, so they will check, when this book was published. If it was published in 2020, and if you say 30 years back, then they say 1990, they will write it. And that is not correct. That also amounts to plagiarism. You should give due credit from the sources from where you have taken. So otherwise it amounts to plagiarism. Even changing the keywords, changing the phrases, and one cannot feel solace under that and say, no, now I am safe. Now even some people, have seen what they will be doing. Even I've seen my own PhD students sometimes saying, sir, I have put it already in this test. Even after writing every chapter, they will be just testing it and says that this has come 90% okay, 95% it is foolproof. So this is not the way. No, first thing is we should be honest, and then we'll be doing it. But just changing the phrases, and if you are just trying to escape from it, is also not correct. Somewhere or the other, one will be caught. And the last important one, the types of plagiarism, is self-stealer. This is what I was telling you, right? You'll be taking the 50 or 40% of your article from your articles already published, and now you're trying to pose it as the new article. Say some 3 paragraphs from the other article which you yourself have written, and some 2 paragraphs from the other article that which you have written, and some 3 or 4 paragraphs of the new of the new in this new article. So that also amounts to plagiarism. That is called as self-stealer. I am stealing from my own source. So that also amounts to plagiarism. So all of us should be very careful about this. Even whether it's a ghost writer, probably you have read it in the newspaper, seen it in the media, how many who have already become professors and have the senior faculty members, even the vice chancellors, because of the plagiarism, right? You have good number of instances throughout the globe wherein, because of the plagiarism, their name, right, they have lost their name, they have lost their fame, and they have lost their positions also. So we should be very careful in these kinds of issues. So in the plagiarism issue, we should not compromise with it. Try to be as virginal as possible. And what is the type of plagiarism number two? And the most important here is, intentionally we forget to write the footnote, right? This is called as the forgotten footnote. So what exactly we mean by forgotten footnote? The writer mentions the author name, right? We will be mentioning Nagaraj, right? Nagaraj 2019 is the name of the author also we are mentioning. We are mentioning the year also. But what exactly we are doing is, but we will not mention from which article of the Nagaraj I have taken. I will not be mentioning from which journal he has, in which journal he has written the article. I am not mentioning. I will be writing Nagaraj 2019. That's all. And no, I will see that it will not be, the source will not be there in the footnote or in the references. So this is forgotten footnote also amounts to plagiarism. It is just to fool the people, because you will be taking only just to say, okay, I have quoted the individual, I have mentioned the author. Even thus, that amounts to plagiarism, right? If I just write, Elappa 2019 or 2018 of his article and say, and okay, I just forget at the time, if somebody asks, why is that? If the evaluator asks you, why is that you have forgotten? Why is that you have not mentioned this Elappa's article? Then you will be saying, no, sir, I just forget. No, that will not be excuse. It will also be brought under the plagiarism only. So then the misinformer. So what is this misinformer? The misinformer is the writer provides inaccurate information regarding the sources. Just I'll be telling, if at all, if I'll be writing the name, right, if I'll be writing the name of the author, I'll be writing the author's name correctly only, but I'll be writing some article of her or him, with which will not be existent at all. So that is so that you will, even if you try to find, even if the author itself tries to find it out, also they should not be able to get it. Say if yeah, Shalini has written an article and we are trying to get it, and if you just write Shalini 2017, and if you don't, if you write the reference or the footnote also, that the article name, tweaking the article name, then even if somebody is trying to find out, they will never be getting, so that you can be safe, because you already mentioned the author name. How much you have not taken that, why they do also is a reason, because they do it because they mention the author name. Only one paragraph for the one. I will give you the examples of that. Only in one paragraph they mention the author name. The rest, pages together they take from that particular individual source, but they will not be. Hence, they will be hiding the information without giving the inaccurate information regarding the source, making it very impossible, making it impossible to find them. This is called as misinforma. And then too perfect paraphrase. This is, the writer cites a source but neglects to put in quotation mark. I told you yesterday itself, probably many of you are also aware of it. When you directly copy the word to word, right, word for word from the original author, then you should make it a quotation marks, right? You should put an inverted comma, you should put a quotation marks to it, and then copy it, and then give due credit to that particular original author. Otherwise, it will be too perfect paraphrase under the plagiarism, right? So this also amounts to plagiarism. Don't no, don't ever think, right, I have already cited the source, but I have not put the quotation mark. No, that also is wrong, right? But neglects to put in the quotation mark. Text has been, when it has been copied from word for a word or close to it, although attributing the basic idea to the source. We will be saying the source, we will be definitely saying the source, but we will not, right? We will not be, will not be putting it in the quotation marks. That also amounts to plagiarism. And then one more important one is resourceful citer. Yesterday also I mentioned about this. From they mention all sources, they paraphrases it, they also uses the quotation appropriately. So then what is the problem? The problem is, the manuscript contains almost no original work. From the first paragraph, I have evaluated such thesis also and I wrote it back to them. From the first paragraph to the conclusion, probably from the first line to that of the last line in the research article or in the thesis, everything, that will be, they will be paraphrasing it, they will be either using quotations, they will be taking it from various sources. But where is the virginal work? Where is the virginal work? There is no virginal work whatsoever. But they have copied everything, but they have given due credit to all the authors from whom they have taken, either paraphrasing it or writing in the quotes whenever they have taken it straight, the word to word. So everything they have been done, but the most important thing is they have not, right? There is no original work itself. So that is, but it becomes very difficult. Where is the plagiarism there? He has taken from them, but he has definitely quoted them, quoted the source. When he has paraphrased, he has mentioned the source. When he has taken directly, he has mentioned it under the quotation. Everywhere he has cited the sources in the references and the footnoting, everything he has done. So, but here the issue is there is no, right? There is no originality in this. So also it can be termed as plagiarism. And the most important one is the perfect, it's called as the perfect crime. What exactly happens is the researcher properly quotes and cites some sources in only a few places. Say I'm taking some 3 or 4 important definitions written by an author. So for the first, I'll be quoting, right? I'll be paraphrasing it for the first. For the second, what I'll be doing for the second paragraph which I've taken, I'll be putting it in the quotes. I'll be mentioning the source. But the third and fourth, right? Third and fourth, without citation, I'll be just taking it from that particular author. That also, right? That's a perfect crime, right? That's also a perfect crime. So what exactly is it? Somebody asked, I've written already this, so I just forget to write it for the third or fourth paragraph. So I've already mentioned that, no, that is not an excuse, and we should be careful with this. And so there are different levels, right? Already time moving up. Yeah, I'll just move quickly. So the different levels of plagiarism. So just, few people nowadays, they will just cut and paste things from verbatim to verbatim, just without any quotations or relevant citation. This is also, that is also extreme or blatant plagiarism. Extreme form of plagiarism is copying evidence and arguments. Copying evidence, arguments, ideas, all are the extreme form of plagiarism. When you speak of the cut and paste or copying the text verbatim without quotation marks is blatant plagiarism. And paraphrasing substantial and crucial sections from one or the more sources without relevant citation is intelligent plagiarism. So all unselective or inadequate citation is intelligent plagiarism too. I will give you those examples which has been provided by the EPW itself, so that we will be having an idea, what exactly, even we will be doing it as sometimes unconsciously. We will also be falling into it. So we should be very careful where exactly we are doing the mistakes. So only I will be providing the examples which are provided by the EPW itself. So the level of plagiarism too, that is the copying few sentences which we already spoke about, and phrases verbatim with acknowledgement but without quotation marks. So that is also the plagiarism. So incorrect citation. Okay, I'll directly go to the examples now. So please read this, right? So this is intelligent plagiarism one. See the virginal text, right? The virginal text, this virginal text is written by Rice Angrave. Observe here, Rice is a surname, right? So surname is first, right? Angrave Rice probably. So Rice surname has come first, then Angrave, 2009, the year in which it is published. The article name is there such a thing as agro-imperialism. New York Times, 22nd November. So the original text says investors who are taking part in the land rush say they are confronting a primal fear, a situation in which food is unavailable at any price. Over the 30 years between the mid 1970s and the middle of this decade, grain suppliers soared and prices fell by about half, a steady trend that led many experts to believe that there was no limit to humanity's capacity to feed itself. This is the original text. You know how this has been intelligently plagiarized. So here, investors rushing to make the most of the land available now fear a situation in which food is unavailable at any price. This is same things. Investors who are taking part in the land rush say they are confronting a primal fear, a situation in which food is unavailable at any price. So what they are doing here is he is changing the words, right? He's changing the words and just writing investors rushing to make the most of the land available now fear a situation which the food is unavailable at any price. Then the period between mid 1970s and 2005, right? The period between mid 1970s and 2005, the supply of grain increased to such levels that prices dropped by about half. You know what the original author has written? Over the 30 years between the mid 1970s and the middle of this decade, now, over the 30 years between the mid 1970s and the middle of this decade, grain suppliers soared and prices fell by about half. You see how cleverly he has done that. He has just stated that the period between the mid 1970s and 2005, the supply of grain increased to such levels that prices dropped by about half. Same thing. Only thing is he's just paraphrasing it very cleverly, but he is not giving the due credit to the author. And then we will see, even in the further lines also, he has done such a beautiful plagiarism work. The supply of grain increased to such a levels that prices dropped by about half. This scenario created the belief among the experts that shortage of food was an impossibility. You see here, a steady trend that led many experts to believe that there was no limit to humanity's capacity to feed itself. Just changed the words. The scenario created the belief among experts. There was, here he's saying experts first. Now he's bringing it here. Led many experts to believe. He's saying the scenario created the belief among experts that shortage of food was an impossibility. The basic, idea, whatever is presented by the Rice in 2009, this is the plagiarized version of that. If you see here, the text is made to appear different by changing some, adding few words, deleting few words, rearranging few words here and there. But the underlying phrase in the verbatim quotation, though the author has not used the quotation mark, just simply, they simply used it. So this is intelligent plagiarism. One, many a times, we also, sometimes if we look at this, we know, that during that particular point of time, when India got independence, there was a food shortage in India. So that's a known, it's a common resource. Why don't we just write it by ourselves? No, from where you read it, how did you know that there was a food shortage? Which book or which article, from which article you came to know that there was a food shortage during that point of time in 1947? You quote that particular thing. Just don't say, no, that's a common resource. So I just used it like that. We should not say that. So then intelligent plagiarism number two. Is an example again given by the EPW itself. Lack of expertise is likely to create. This is the original is written by Bhattacharya A in 2001 in the Competition Policy, India and the WTO, which was published in Economic and Political Weekly, volume 36, number 51, page number 4710 to 4713. So lack of expertise is likely to create special problems for merger review, which was deleted among with most of the chapter 3 of the MRTPA, dealing with concentration of economic power, close the brackets, by 1991 amendment, and is now being reintroduced in the new bill after an unsatisfactory compromise. After the unsatisfactory compromise. But the bill also allows the Commission to look post facto into a merger for which approval was not sought in advance and to undo or modify it if it sees fit. So what this, when they wrote this article, they have quoted Bhattacharya 2001, right? In the brackets, you can see it here. The one in the other article by some X, this individual, what he has done, he has rewrote this. He has paraphrased it like this. Lack of expertise is also most likely to create special problems for merger reviews, as these were deleted even in the MRTP Act in 1991. So similar to this, right, lack of expertise is likely to create special problems for merger review, which was deleted along with most of the chapter 3rd of the MRTPA, right? So similar kind of a thing, the Monopoly Restricted Trade Practices Act is mentioning about that. So lack of expertise is also most likely to create special problems for the merger reviews, as these were deleted even in the MRTP Act in 1991. Then, further, the bill also allows the CCI to look post facto into merger for which approval was not sought in advance and to undo or modify it if it sees fit. Here, what's the problem? The problem here is from here to here, the same lines, the bill also allows to, it seems fit. Just check this. So here to here, right, here to here, the underlined lines are almost similar, right? Or not almost similar, they are from word to word. They are word to word, but he has not put it under the quotation. He should have put the quotation over here, inverted commas over here, right? Quotation for this. And then he should have mentioned Bhattacharya 2001. He has paraphrased the first 3-4 lines, and then the another 4-5 lines, he has just taken it, right? Just copied the word to word, but he has not put it under the quotation. So it also amounts to plagiarism, though it is an intelligent plagiarism. And the third one, right? The third, this is the final example which I'll be giving now under this. So the intelligent plagiarism number 3. So that is the third example which we are giving. This is the versional text is from Amedo and Kimberly, right? Both of them wrote this article in 2008. How would a return to the gold standard affect the US economy? How would a return to the gold standard affect the US economy? So weblog entry about.com, US economy, available at the website is also mentioned here. So here, what exactly is the original author writing? The benefit of a gold standard is that money is backed by a fixed asset. The government can only print as much money as its country has in gold. This discourages inflation, which is too much money chasing too few goods. It also discourages government budget deficits and debts, which cannot exceed the supply of gold. In addition, more productive nations are directly rewarded as they export more goods, they can accumulate more gold. The US does not even have enough gold at current rates to pay off the portion of its debt owed to foreign investors. For example, China, Japan, and other countries own $3.2 trillion in US Treasury debt, but there is only $2 to 3 billion total in gold reserves at Fort Knox. So this is the virginal article, right? This is the virginal article. Now you know how this has been plagiarized, right? So it is cleverly done, right? It is cleverly done. The benefit of the gold standard is that the money is backed by a fixed asset. The governments can only print as much money as its currency holds gold. Now he is mentioning the author name here, right? He is mentioning the Amedo 2008. He has mentioned the author name. Fair enough, right? He has mentioned the author name, Amedo 2008, and he has paraphrased because he has paraphrased it. Then the next, the next lines are also taken from the same article, which is not giving the due credit for the author, original author. So this discourages not only inflation, but also government budget deficits, trade deficits. He has added few more words, that's all, right? Budget deficits, all is there. He has added few more things here, the budget deficits, trade deficits, and government debts, which cannot exceed the supply of gold. Further, productive nations benefit by accumulating more gold as they export more goods. It should be appreciated that the US does not even have enough gold at current rates to pay at the portion of its debt owed to the foreign investors. And these lines, China, Japan, and the countries who owe $3.2 trillion in US Treasury debt, but there is only $2 to 3 billion at 914 per ounce, dollar per ounce total in gold reserves at Fort Knox. It's almost, the word to word has been copied, but he is not giving any due credit to the original author. So though the entire things has been taken from the Amedo's article of 2008, but here he has not given the due credit to that. So we should be very, very careful, and if we feel we can fool anybody, we easily we are just mentioning it somewhere in the for some 3 or 4 lines, or in the bottom of the paragraph some 3 or 4 lines, and the rest of it you can just take it away. Even that is not excusable, because at one point of the other, or when you will be moving towards the higher position, they will try, your own friends will help you to catch you. And so hence, and moreover, even our integrity also matters. Why should we do it when we know that it is wrong? And hence, let us, in case if you want to, right, if you want to take the original lines itself because you feel that is explaining the best, so then put the quotation mark and give the due credit for it. Otherwise, paraphrase it, then give the due credit to the author. But anyway, this one should not forget, right? Yesterday also we discussed the review of literature, and today as a continuation to this, right? This when doing the review of literature also, don't do it like this and say, okay, this anyhow, review of literature, I have done this, I have said the author name, and in the text, in the third or fourth chapter when we'll be writing, so in the first 2 3 lines you mention the author, in the next paragraph you just copy the verbatim the same thing, or even paraphrasing without giving due credit, will be creating a lot of problem in the coming days to come. And moreover, it also keeps pricking you also, right? because you will be knowing. You may one we can cheat the whole world, but not our own self. We'll be knowing that we have done wrong and which we should not do. So with this, we will just, there are a few more things. I will just send it to the organizers, and they will circulate this PPT. Probably tomorrow they it will be with you, and we will now. Bharat, help me. So yes. Now we will be trying to understand the research study overview, research approaches, questionnaire design, and so on and so forth. The first important thing, right? The first important thing yesterday, also I gave you the overview of how the research work should be there, right? Starting from the introduction, review of literature, identification of the problem. Here, the research study, after this review of literature, we are speaking of the overview of the research study after the review of literature, because we have covered up to that point yesterday. So for identifying the research problem, right? Identifying the research problem, this you will be doing it based on the review of the literature. Don't forget this. We will be doing this based on the review of literature. We will be taking the unresolved question, right? We will be taking a paradox. We'll be taking the missing piece of information, uncertain where there is uncertainty in that particular article, or there is a theoretical inconsistency, or the one which is unresolved question there. We are trying to take those issues. We are trying to take those issues and we are trying to solve. So that constitutes, right? That constitutes our research problem. And moreover, all the research gap that which we have identified, all the research gap which we have identified will not be, right. All the research gap that which we have identified will not be your research problem. You will be identifying series of research gaps through your literature, but you will be covering, right? You'll be covering only few of them, or one of them, or two of them. So that constitutes your research problem, based on which you'll be writing your objectives of the study. And of course, the hypothesis will follow it. So the important thing in the applied research, right, which in the applied research is, you should begin with what your research problem is clearly, right? If you are able to identify, right, if you are able to identify first the research gap properly, then come to the conclusion why you're doing this study, and able to say, to fill one particular research gap, right? One, because you cannot, you may be a good researcher, have identified some 7 or 8 gaps in the literature that which you have reviewed, but you will be trying, right? You will be trying to fill in one or two of it, because it's very difficult, very difficult to cover all of them. So you'll be taking one or two of it, and we'll be doing your study. So first, clearly mention what is the research problem, right? What is the research problem, and how you will be handling it. So that is the most important step, right? How you'll be handling it comes in the design. So when you speak about the research problems, you will be saying what you'll be identifying your objectives of the study. What is that you'll be studying? This will be again based on the research gap and the research problem, right? Research problem basically helps you to find out, helps you to frame your objectives of your study. And then choose appropriate research designs, right? Choose appropriate research design to collect the given, to study the given problem. Variety of ways you can study a problem. It is not that there is no standardized way that you will be finding, you'll be studying a particular problem. There are good number of, right? There are good number of ways to find out the solution for the research problem. And each way, right? Each way, each way has its own advantages. Each way have its own disadvantages also. So the best is, you just read all of them, right? When you will be doing the review of literature, you have seen how the other authors have used that particular tools, and you will be able to identify what are the advantages for that author, while framing, while doing his research. You will be clearly understanding it. So based on that, you choose, right? You choose the design task that which will be which you feel appropriate, right? So based on that, you decide. And moreover, most important thing is, as I told you, there will be variety of ways. And even, in the initial days of the starting, in the beginning of the research, we feel, no, I should do this, I should do that, because we'll be high on our hopes. And we, first, yeah, think practically. At that point of time only, think practically. Can you do that? Can you do that? Because what is the issue? Yes, zeal is there, vigor is there. You can definitely do it. I'm not saying, I'm not doubting anybody's ability as a researcher. But here the most important thing is, what about the time and resource constraint? Think on that also. Do you have that much of time with you? Because if the research work or the agency has stipulated only 2 years for you, you should complete that research work in 2 years. If your PhD means it is 3.5 years, 4 years, then you should complete it within 4 years. So all this is there. And moreover, about the resource constraints. Is it possible for you, right, whether your financial resources allow you to collect the data from that particular place? Is it possible to purchase that statistical package if your university library, or if your university or if your college does not have it? Think on all these lines, right? Think all these lines. What are the constraints, right? What are the constraints? Fine, going for the most wonderful research design is too good, right? You have a variety of ways to attain it. But when you do the research design, also think about, right, think about the resource, the time and the resource constraint also. Then think practically, then choose the one, right? Then they choose the one. But I'm not saying to compromise, right? I'm not saying to you to compromise with the things just because that you're not able to afford do the substandard research. No, I'm not saying that. Choose your sample in such a way, right, that you do not have to, you will not be stretching out your resources, right? You will not be draining out your resources, or you'll be going in for debt to do that amount of the sample size. See that, you will be doing a good work, but within your limitations, right? Within your resource constraints. Think on those lines, right? A better design can be, research design is the one, right, which takes care, right, not only of the quality of the research, but also keeps in the mind the the resource constraint and the time constraint also. And unless, every research design should involve the trade-off between the cost and the accuracy, right? So it will definitely should involve the trade-off between the cost and accuracy. Hence, choose the design to fit the problem and the resources at hand, not necessarily based on what has been done in the past, or on based on your personal preferences. Just don't think on those lines. No, I feel, every researcher will be always feeling, more the sample size, higher will be the accuracy. That every one of us know. And that doesn't mean, if the allotted time is just 3 years, and I'll be thinking, no, I'll be covering some 30,000 samples, 10,000 or 20,000 samples. No, not like that. You should know, right, what is the resource constraint, what is the time constraint. And even with the 300 or 400 sample, if you take it properly, right, if you do it random sampling perfectly, then the results will be more accurate also. So that also you should keep in your mind, and then do the research. Then, collecting the data, that is also a very important part of the research study, right? How, which data suits your work, right? Which data suits your work, whether the primary data, secondary data, or both, So, of course, when you say primary data, of course, secondary data will also be used by the researcher. So that also is a very important stage. So here, you should know what is the universe, what is your sample size. All this you should have a information. Based on that, you will be collecting the data. Sometimes you will not be knowing the universe size, the population size, and even then there are certain tools which will help you to take the sample even at that juncture also. So use the appropriate sampling techniques, and select the appropriate amount of data, and only then the things will be falling in place. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for you. And before starting collecting the data, do a pilot study, right? Do a pilot study, check your questionnaire, right? Then start with that. And the secondary sources, right? Secondary data sources always should be collected from the authentic sources. As far as possible, collect from the approved financial institutions, and the government, the respective state governments or central governments, annual reports, economic surveys, right? Or if you want to go with the banks, then go with the annual reports, RBI reports, like that. Go as far as possible and cross-check if you're taking, even when we take the data from the CMI, though it is also now authenticated data, sent from the data from the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy or Tata Data Services. When you take the data from them also, cross-check that data, right? If there are some policies, if there are some errors, and only then go with the data, but never depend on the unauthorized data that which are much available on the, which are not there with any source, which are available on the internet, right? Good amount of data is available on the internet without any source. Just don't take them, right? Just don't take them. Many do the research based on the data available on the Wikipedia also. Wikipedia itself says, right, check it before using it. So you should not use the data for the research from the Wikipedia and such internet sources, right? That gives you a fair amount of idea of what exactly the things are, but don't take the data, don't take your definition from the Wikipedia and say that you are taken from it. Don't ever do that. And another important thing is process and analyze the data to meet each objective, right? If you have 5 objectives, 4 objectives, each objective, finally you should, right? You should be able to find out your all the 4, 5 objectives, how many objectives you have taken, how many hypotheses you test, all that it will be there in the framework of the study. In the research design, you should not leave any one of them. And data processing, when you start with the data processing, it includes coding, data entry, cleaning, editing, file creation, documentation, and then analysis. Right? First, it should start from the coding, then the data entry, cleaning, then editing, right? Then file creation, then documentation. We should be very clear with all this in each stage, right? In each stage, we should be very careful. You should always double check, right? You should always double check. And many a times what we do when we enter the data today, we just save it with a different name. Again, we will be checking, we will be copying it and keeping it at other sources, but always put the date whenever you want to save that particular folder when you are entering the data. And as far as possible, right, as far as possible, clean and edit data as and when it is entered, right? When you have the source, right, when you have kept some saved the data in the different folders, see that, right? See that it will not create doubts in your ambiguity in your at the end, because which was the one which is the final. So put the date each whenever you say you'll be saving on that date, save with that date. So that will help you to see that which is the final one and which was the one which you saved in the first day. So if at all, if you are having the different folders, otherwise it's always safe to save in the same folder, right? Same folder, updating the same file is always better. And each day you save that folder in this other file, in the other location. So that is also safe. And and even before starting the analysis, see that, right, that you manually check, go back to your questionnaires, manually check, whether the data entered is correct or not. Randomly also select few areas and check whether the data entered is not either correct or not. Otherwise, there will be a huge amount of problems at the end. When you will be finding it difficult, you will along be surprised, and then again you will go back to the first stage of entry up to where exactly the data has been entered and try to see. Then by that time you would have lost months together. So don't do that. When you enter the data, right, before analyzing the data, see that you recheck the data that which you have entered from the source, right? Whether it is in your questionnaires or whether it's a survey. From whichever is the survey, that whichever is the source from which you have taken the data and entered it, cross check few of, at least randomly cross check few of it. So that will be always ideal. And then communicate. And the last step, of the research study will be communicating the results with the agency or the public. That usually will be from the agency. You have to do it, and either you will be writing a comprehensive or a technical report, right? You'll be writing a comprehensive or technical report to the agency that which has given us this research project, or if it is a thesis, you'll be writing a full right? Complete thesis you'll be writing and submitting it to the, if it's a PhD, you'll be submitting it to the university. And if it is for the agency, see that there is an executive summary into it. And either it's a thesis or it's an agency funded project. See that you write a good amount of articles based on your study. Now, for the PhD, it has been made mandatory, and even for the UGC projects also, they have made it a mandatory. But see that even otherwise also, write as many articles as possible based on your study, so that that will reach the researchers all over. Right? Many researchers will be reading the articles in that particular area in which they are interested, and when you will be writing on your area, they will also be knowing what exactly you have done. So that is most important thing. And another important thing is then recommendations. If you feel that your recommendation, you have got a very good findings of your study, see that you submit it to the agents, not only to the agency but also to the policymakers also, so that it will be of some use to the society. So this is how exactly we should communicate the results with the agency, with the general public, either through the, and even you can also write the articles in the newspapers, write articles in the newspapers, or you can also come before the media and say, if you have some good findings and good policy making suggestions, so that also you can communicate the results through the mass media. So that will also help, that will also help both for the society as well as for your personal growth also. So now we will try to understand the various research approaches, right? Various research approaches. First important thing is, all of us are aware of this. We have two important segments of the data. One is primary data, another one is secondary data. So all of us are aware of what exactly it means, and I will not be elaborating on that. The basic thing is, when we collect directly, right? When we collect directly from the main source, when we collect directly from the main source, that is called as the primary data. So here, the most important advantage of the primary data is that it is usually chosen and tailored specifically to meet the demands or requirements of a particular research. You say, I'm working on the foreign direct investment, so I'll be collecting the data based on my objectives to suit to the needs. So I'm doing a project for the UGC on the agriculture crisis. So that primary data I'll be collecting suiting to the needs of that particular objectives of my particular research project. So this is the major advantage when we go in for the primary data. We have different methods of gathering the data. Surveys are there, experiments are there, observation is there, or the qualitative methods are also there. When we say about the surveys, it is self-administered, telephone, personal interview. We can do one of them, or it is exploring, when it is a description type of it, to explore the relationship among the variables. Also, we use the methods. And in case of experiments, right? In case of the experiments, we use this, right? We use experiments when we need to evaluate the interventions, to test the cause-effect relationship, either in the field. Say, for example, even to find out the productivity of the irrigated land, they go to the field, right? They go to the field and then they calculate it. Or in the science project, then into the laboratory they will do it. So observation, few things, it is better to follow the observation method. We also have a case study method. So in the observation method also, right, while collecting the primary data through observation, right, there is both the intervening with the object and without intervening with the subject also, we collect the data. So in detail we can discuss on that, restricted to data that is accessible to observation. So we will be doing that as a part of the collecting the data for the primary data. Then the qualitative is either through in-depth interviews or the observations, right? All this we do or the ways of collecting the primary data. So usually in the primary data, the researcher plays a very important role, right? Even when it is a self-administered surveys also, right now it is becoming a very popular self-administered surveys, wherein the researcher will not come into contact while collecting the data. But here the most important thing is while framing the questionnaire, again the researcher is most important. Researcher will be framing the questionnaire to suit to his objectives, to suiting his objectives and try to gather as much as information, as much as data as he could to find out to make the analysis. So hence, this is a very important one. Otherwise, the interviewer will be there and the interviewee, right? Researcher and respondent will be there almost on all the primary data collection, right? Either directly or indirectly. The interviewer will be there, interviewee will be there, or respondent will be there, researcher will also be there in case of primary data gathering. So here, each one of it, right? Each one of it has its own advantages. Each one of it has its own disadvantages also. Say, for example, when we speak of interview as a method, right? Interview as a method. I will not go in depth with it. One or two I will just explain and go further. So when you speak of the primary interview method as in to gather the primary data collection, here, in-depth informations are collected. When you do the primary data collection, the pros of the interviews is you get the in-depth information, and there will be non-response and response, non-response and response bias can be detected. You can see, how they answer, and you can just, while taking itself, you can know whether it's biased or not. Few times, always the expected answers will come. When you are doing a sociological surveys or a behavioral surveys, when you are asked, during time of inflation, how much, when the prices are going, when the prices are going up, how much will you buy? He will say, I will buy less. This is the expected answer, right? Do you allow your wife also to work outside? He will see, even if he doesn't allow, what's the expected answer? Expected answer is, yes, I give full freedom. I always believe in women empowerment. So what is the expected answer? So that also will be knowing in the primary data collection. In case if the researcher is well trained to understand, right, to understand whether it's the expected answer or the real answers. So all these kinds of things can be understood in the interview method. If again, the important thing is the researcher should be trained, or the one who collects the data, the enumerator who goes to the field should be trained to collect the data. And what is the disadvantage of this? Disadvantage is it could be more time consuming, very expensive. An interviewer should not be biased. He should be trained. Giving training when the individual is biased also is a very difficult kind of a thing, and individuals are prone to biasness. So all these things are the defects of this. Similarly, you can have for each method, right? For each survey method, experiments, observation, for qualitative, for each of them, you can have pros and cons, right? For say, I'll go for the observation method and just move from this. So here also, say when we speak of the observation method, the important thing is either the when observation as a data collection tool is used systematically for even there also you can put subject to checks and controls. So there are different approaches to the observation method, that is structured or unstructured, controlled or uncontrolled. Either you can be also participant or non-participant, right? You can intervene or non-intervening. So all these type of different observation methods are there. So based on that, right? Based on that. So usually, what are the pros of this? Even a simple example is when the new teacher is employed to any institution, right, they'll be asked to give the demo, right? They'll be asked to give a demo. And, when the teacher is giving the demo, the one from the management, either the principal or the HOD, and one from the management will also be sitting there, right? Will still be sitting in the classroom, and they will also be part of the, right? They will also be part of the group. So they will be observing it. They will not be intervening anything. They'll be just observing how whether this new teacher who has applied for this post is fit to teach in this particular section or otherwise. So they'll be just seeing it, they'll be observing it, and they'll be observing the teaching, right? So just being a participant, they'll be observing it. This is one of the example, right? This is one of the example of observation method, and then they'll be putting, they'll be writing, what all the observation that they did at that point of time. And say if they want to intervene in that observation, they may also ask some questions, right? They may also ask some questions in order to identify, right? In order to identify But in the end, they may also ask a question to identify whether they really have, they can answer any such areas where even the unprecedented questions come in the class. How the teacher will react to that. They may ask pose certain questions and also observe the uh, observe the behavior, observe the knowledge of the a particular individual. So then you also have a focus groups, right? Qualitative focus groups, in-depth interviews. Here, focus groups is gathering two or more people with similar characteristics or who poses a common traits. So with them, there will be groups. They will arrange it in the groups, and they will observe, what exactly being a part of it also, right? Being a part of the group focus group, they will observe and collect the data. And it's almost like similar to the interviews, but this involves discussion, right? They will be arranging a group and they will be allowing them to discuss. They will be raising the issues, and there will be interaction based on the question and answers. They'll be writing down the answers, or they will be recording this, right? They'll be recording the entire scenario and later on taking out the data out of it. So what are the pros of it? It incurs low cost compared to the interviews, relatively lesser cost because it's a group. And this is because interviewer does not have to discuss with each participant individually, and it takes lesser time too because you can organize it to groups and collect the data in the groups based on their group discussion, based on the question answers which will be posing it to the entire group or to the focus group. So this, and what is the disadvantage of this? What is the cons of this is there will be response bias will be always there, and it will be very difficult. And group thinking does not clearly mirror the individual opinion also. And sometimes in the group you're expected to answer in such a way, so they may answer it in such a fashion. So these are all the issues. Of course, individual biasness also will be there when you do it, when you go in for the interview, because they may give you the expected answer, not the real answer. In the group thinking, also there is in the focus groups also, or in the group also, there may be, right. They may not be mirroring their individual opinions. They may be trying to see that the group as a such, their ego and other things are not hurt with their answers. In such a way, they may try to answer it also. So these are the overall way, right? These are the overall things, right? How this data is collected, but always there is an advantage of the primary data over the secondary data. It's very specific. If the researcher is trained, or the one who collects the data is trained, it will be accurate, and you can also, right, it will be having up-to-date information. You'll be having the control over the data. And but of course there are disadvantages also. The primary data, it is very expensive, it is time consuming, and yeah, so these are the major constraints of it. So secondary data, as all of us are aware, right, uh, we collected from these already collected source, right? We already collect the data from the uh, collected source. We are not directly collecting the data from the source. We are taking the data which has been already collected. So we depend on the authenticated sources, right? Generally, we use the government statistics. I was telling you the annual reports of the institutions, or the economic survey of the published by the government. So we run our NSSO reports, CMIE reports, and NSSO, CSO reports. All these reports we do collect. The first preference always give for the government reports in the secondary data also. Then, to cross check, or you can always mention, this is what is found in the data published in the government sources, and this is what it is in the other sources like CMIE and other Tata consultancy, data Tata. So all this and all you can always mention that. So this is one more important thing, but always try to avoid taking the data from the newspapers, right? Try to collect, go to the original source. If there is a news report stating that in the economic survey of 2020, 2019-20, this is their growth rate of India is projected at 5% or 4.8%, then go to the economic survey, right? Go to the economic survey, don't go to the newspaper. Because on that day, if he has published, printed wrongly, next day he will give the error, he will change it. He will say, coriander we will issue, and the coriander we will issue, and he will correct it, but which will not be checking it. So as far as possible, right, as far as possible, see that. Don't go with the newspaper data, go with the journals, right, go with the journals, and more so go with the government sources of the data, wherein you have adequate amount of sales source of data available in the government agencies, right? RBI is giving you adequate data. Uh, the government agencies of economic survey is giving you the adequate data. NABARD data is available. NSSO data is available. CSO data is available. And of course, census data is available. So good amount of data is available for the background that which you are want to do your research as far as possible. First, in case if you depend on the secondary data, go with that. Either if you want the trade data or any data for that matter, foreign direct investment, any data for that matter, you have the authenticated data source from the government also. You can always cross-check it if you want to do it right, but even when you take the secondary data from the authenticated source also, you should cross-check it. Certain times, even in the government sources also, there may be a mistake, by mistake, right, by mistake, instead of putting comma, there may be a full point and the entire data set looks odd. Check the previous years, right? Check the previous years, check how can that be, and then cross-check it, and you will definitely be able to know it. And another important thing is, right, in case of measurement instruments, right, questionnaire, if it is a questionnaire, then elect the verbal or a written reports from verbal or written questions or statements. In case of observation, as we already discussed it, one or more observers record the information, or you can record it also. You can record it and later on record the data. And then the physical instruments, you can use lot of electronic consuming devices like cameras, tape recorders, barometers. Depending on the need of our study, we can use as many instruments, physical instruments, as we require. Nowadays, even in the mobile phone, also the recording is available, and you can also record the video as well as audio recording is there. Even when I did the primary data collection for my UGC major research projects, even when I was collecting the data, when I was entering it, I saw that, with the permission, we also recorded the entire collection of the data also. Because even slightly, if I had entered it wrongly, I can always cross-check it. At some places, they never allowed it. They said, we'll give you the data, but don't do the video recording. Fine, we should also respect their privacy. And when they say it, we should also switch off the mobile phone immediately. That also is there. But with taking the permission of them and while collecting the data, if you record it, that will also be good to cross-check what we have entered is correct or not. So then the most, we're running out of time. No, yeah, still enough time is there. How data are gathered, right? In this table, I tried to give the different ways of how exactly the personal interviews, telephone or computer interview, self-administered questionnaires, observational traces, secondary sources, how we are doing it. So in the personal interviews, right, the households survey can be administered, surveys can be given on the site also, surveys as well as field experiments. So laboratory for the personal interview, we should be using the focus groups, right? That can be our lab, right? That can be our lab. We can use the focus groups. For the others, it is survey and the field experiments. For the telephone, right, for the telephone or computer interview, right, for the telephone or computer interview survey method. So use on-site computer interviews, laboratory also computer interviews. So self-administered questionnaire, here, in the household also, the individual will be administering, right? He will be writing. So basically, it will be on-site, right? You will not be going to each individually to the household. So it will be survey and field experiments. So experiments, and of course, even the others also, it is survey only. And in the observation and traces, right? In the household, it's not applicable there. So on the site, yeah, again, observation method will be used and they'll be taken down. In the laboratory is also that observable characteristics only. Others also same thing. And in the secondary sources, we are not going to the household. On site, we are using the records which are already available. Then we are not using any laboratory because it's already there. So others is any other sources, right, to cross-check it, either the government industry or other external sources. So you can use the other sources also. So here, for the personal interview, the important thing is, right, always will be, this is one of the one most important advantage of the personal interview, right? Though it is little time consuming and resource constraint is also will be there, resources also is required here in the personal interview. The important thing about it is, you can, if at all, if the researcher is trained or the one who collects the data is trained, he can also understand whether the data, the one interviewee is giving the biased data or not. He can always immediately cross-check, right? He can pose another question to him and cross-check it. And if you say, for example, when we were collecting the data on the farm prices, they were just telling us, yeah, they showed the BPL card. When we asked whether BPL or APL, they said BPL, and we asked first before we asked, they will also show the BPL card. See, we have the BPL card, and what's the source of income, yeah, this, and if you find a tractor, if you find the refrigerator in their house, you can always ask them, but see that how the way in which you pose the question should not hurt them. So you can always immediately ask them, hope, right, this tractor, when did you purchase this tractor? Or hope you're using this tractor or tractor for cultivation in your agriculture land. Like this, when you say, only then he will be saying, yes, this is my tractor. I only purchased this tractor. Otherwise, he'll say it's my friend and he has just kept it as for, I have just got it for the hire. So many, by seeing the house itself, you'll be able to understand that they are not BPL but APL families, but they are having a BPL cards with them. So like that also, a personal interviewer, if it is, if we buy the observation method, even while we go with the surveys, right, we go with the questionnaire also, he can always be, right, he can always observe few things and make all these points in the remarks. And then, while entering the data, right, he can always say, this is what is claimed, this is what is observed. This is what we did when my student was doing his PhD on poverty. So in one district, we have 92% of the respondents, right? 92% of the respondents in that particular, I don't want to name the district, had the BPL cards. We collected some 600 data. All this, that was a random sampling, and 92% of them had the ration cards. And even the secondary data was coming to 94% only, 94% itself. So the data which we randomly took also was correct. But what we observed, right? What we observed is it was coming based on that, based on the whether the house was kacha or pakka house, whether it was RCC roof house, whether what was the um, flooring of the house. We just considered all that, and we also made a point of that. We made in the remark column, we wrote all that. This is what we observed. And then while entering the data, this is what the BPL as per the BPL cards. This is what as per the observation method. So as per the observation method, and we took their income, right? We took their income that which they claim and the income that which we observed, and the all the materialistic wealth that which they were having. All this we just calculated, and we said, in that particular district, it is 26% of BPL as per our observation method, and we have our tools that which we followed, and we also explained that. So that is how we should do. That's only then a good research will come out. Otherwise, whatever they say, if we keep on writing them and coming back, and that doesn't mean that you'll be intervening in them in the middle and asking, no, you own a tractor, how come you will become BPL? Then he will not give you the data. He will say, you go, I don't want to answer to you. So these are the issues, right? You should be very careful. And in the questionnaire, I'll be explaining to you why and how we can be. Why we should be careful is one thing, and how we can be careful is also another important thing that we should be there. And simple guidelines on when to use the different methods. So when you describe the population, go in for the survey method. Describing user visitor, it is an on-site survey. Then describing the potential users or the general population, then go in for the household surveys. Then describing the observable characteristics of the visitor, on-site observation. Measuring the impact, cause, effect relationship, then it is better to go in for experiments. Then anytime, secondary data is available. Anytime, if at all, if you get the suitable secondary data, then you can go for secondary data. Then short, if you want it to be a simple household studies, very small sample, then go in for telephone service. Then if at all, if it is captive audience are a very interested population. If you want to do an IT, right? If you want to do a survey on IT, BT, then you can go for the self-administered service. But if you want to see the agrarian crisis or see the unorganized problems in the unorganized sector, see the problems of the migrant laborers, then you cannot use a self-administered service. You cannot say, you prepare one self-administered survey and you just prepare one wonderful questionnaire and you send it to them over email, and many of them will not be having the emails, migrant workers, or even if they have the mobile, you cannot ask them, I'm sending it through your questionnaire through WhatsApp, you just answer it. No, that cannot be done. So you know where exactly. That's the reason why we have said captive audience or very interested population. And we say, the population which is well versed with that, right? Is well versed with it. So you should identify whether which study is suitable for which. So self-administered surveys are good for the ITBP, or the one which is a captive audience, right? Which is a very captive audience. It's very easy to handle with them. And testing new ideas, then it is a focus group or experimentation of focus groups. In-depth study, as I told you, the personal interviews and focus groups is always ideal and better, because many a times, and some, when we went to do that poverty study, I both myself and my research scholar were together, and they were very happy showing their entire irrigated lands also. But they used to say, no, sir, this card we are not going to leave. You don't write anything, this is just off the record we are saying it. You don't write all that. This is what I'm entitled to. Then there will be, he was just justifying himself, one individual justifying himself, saying that, you see how the politicians loot. What if I take little provisions which I'll be getting at the subsidized rate, taking this BPL card? I am the one who is giving the food for everybody. All these kinds of justification also he had. So like that, all this in the amount of idea that you will get if you go to the field yourself. So as far as possible, at least to get an idea, to get a fair amount of idea in the research, if possible, try to do the primary study and do the personal interviews. You yourself go to the field at least to collect the data. At least 1/3 of it, if you collect yourself and if your friends or the enumerators whom you are training and sending them, they let them collect the rest of it. Only then you are acquainted with what is the ground reality. While writing your thesis or your project report, then it will come out perfect. Otherwise, there will be no point, right? Just somebody will be going and whatever he with all biasness will be writing as a record, that only will be taken. So that is the reason that why I said at least go and collect the data. At least 1/3 of it you go and collect the data by yourself, so that you get an idea, right? You get an idea of what exactly is there going on in the field. So now we will now go to the questionnaire design. That is most important one when you collect the primary data. Otherwise, it becomes a very difficult, right? It becomes a very difficult to get the correct information, because the first you design a questionnaire in such a way that you get the data that which you require for the analysis to prove or disprove your hypothesis, right? And another most important thing is, because your objective is to find few important things to fill in the research gap, So based on that, you design the questionnaire. So what are general kinds of information, right? And what we should do, what we should not do, what it should contain, what it should not contain, what type of questions we should avoid, all that we will try to understand in this questionnaire design. So first important thing is, generally in all the questionnaires, right? In all the questionnaires, the demographics, socio-economic conditions, right? The personal attributes, these are all required, right? These are all required for any study. This will help us to understand how the sample size is, right? What is the age, right? What is the age of it? What is the family size of it? What's the age of the respondent? What is the education of the respondent? Whether they are BPL, whether they are APL, right? What is the income of the family? What is the income of the family? where they are staying, right? From where they came. If it's a migrant worker, which is their native place, for how many months they go back, for how many months they will be going back, once in a year or twice in a year. So all this are important factors. So these kinds of demographic, socio-economic conditions of the individuals is a must for any questionnaire design. And the next important thing is cognitive. What do we mean understand by this cognitive kind of information? What do they understand? What do they believe in? Right? What do they believe in? What are their beliefs? Right? So this will help us to understand, right? This will help us to understand, this is the reason that why these number of respondents answered to this particular question like this. So this will help you in understanding your respondents much better. So cognitive issues are also must be a part of the questionnaire design. So that will be very important to understand the overall respondent's attitude. Then affective, what is this affective? This is about the attitude, how they feel about, right? How they feel. One thing is about the belief, right? One thing is about the cognitive, that is about the beliefs. I believe, right? I believe in the women empowerment. This is that's the reason that why we always respect the women. I believe in a religion which have a festivals, right? Which we will be willing to do. All this will be willing to celebrate rituals with great pomp, right? That may become the reason. That may also become the reason for their poverty. I'm just trying to say that may not be also. So just we'll be knowing what are their beliefs. How many times they'll be spending the money. Then we can correlate later. What are their beliefs? What are their rituals? All these things will also be there. And what is their attitude like? What is their preference? Right? What is their likes? What is their dislikes? These things also will be helping us to understand. And then the behavioral aspects of it, right? The behavioral aspects of the individuals, what they were working earlier, for what they're doing right now, right? What their plans are for the future. So all this will also help, right? If you questionnaire design, these are the basic information. Within one page, you can fill in all this, right? You can prepare a wonderful chart with the demographic, socio-economic conditions, right? The place, and if you want the socio-economic characteristics, the religion, the caste-wise also, if you want, you can collect the data, and the cognitive attitudes and the affective, which affects their attitudes and the behavioral pattern. So all this can be the first important, right, part A, part of the questionnaire design. And then, when we come in for the questions, right, when we come in for the questions, the most important thing that which we will be concentrating on is about the question structure. Whether the questions should be open-ended or it should be closed-ended, right? It should be closed-ended or it should be open-ended. When we say it's an open-ended, right, open-ended, we may ask them, what were the most important phases in your life, right? What is your child's when you were a child? What is your favorite? Open-ended, right? We are allowing him, and according to you, uh, what are the solutions? What are the solutions to end the farm crisis? We are asking the farmer itself. You please solicit your opinion and tell us. According to you, how can we solve the agrarian crisis? So we are not giving him, these are the options. You just tell, okay, based on this, you please tell us. We are not selling that. It's an open-ended. He can tell anything, right? He can tell anything. He may tell, farmers should be given free loans. Okay, fine. Or he may say, we should be given subsidized loan. Fine. No, we are not choosing any answer for him. That is the open-ended question. And, I may ask you a question, right? What was your webinar workshop experience? That's an open-ended question. But if I ask you, is your webinar experience, right? Is your webinar experience good or average? Then you will be saying only these two, right? That's a closed-ended one. That's a closed-ended one. Or we can also go with the closed-ended with the ordered choices. We say you rate only in this 3 or 4, right? In the 3 or 4, good, bad, average, excellent. So with the ordered choices also we will go, right? With the unordered choices also we will go. We'll say yes or no, right? Partially closed-ended also we can do, right? Are you feeling better today? So options have Options, partially closed-ended. May I be a resource person for tomorrow also? No, these kinds of things, right? Is that your final answer? No, look, when you speaking of this, these are all the examples for the closed-ended. Will you help me in completing my research work? No, these kinds of things, right? So which question, right? Which question for which aspect that you should be thorough with, and you should ask yourself when you write whether this appropriate is, whether it's an open-ended question will be good for this, or whether it's a closed-ended question. So based on that, you just first do the open-ended, then write, okay, if you feel it, then go to the field and observe it, whether it is correct or not. Then come back to it and change that question. If you feel it to be closed-ended, you change it. So that is how it can be done. And even when you observe few questionnaires also, you will be understanding how exactly the others have done, and based on that also you can definitely know. Then after doing the questionnaire, then check whether this question necessary for you. Is this question necessary in this questionnaire? Is this useful to me? Simply, the others have put, I also have put. Okay, socio-demographic profile, it is required. Oh, all this 1-2 pages, I bet whether it is of any need. Basic things I definitely need, but whether I require in NLEM. I'm doing an economic study, I'm either doing on the behavioral study, or I'm doing a psychological study. So how much is required? Only that much questions I'll be putting. So whether the question is necessary. Or several questions needed on this subject. So sometimes, double-barreled questions will be put, right? Double-barreled is putting, instead of putting two questions, you'll be putting only one question. Say, how satisfied are you with the pay and work environment? One question, direct. Instead of asking how satisfied are you with your work, how satisfied are you with your pay, how satisfied are you with your work environment, I will say, how satisfied are you with your pay and work environment? So that is double-barreled questions. It should not be too many, right? You should not pose too many double-barreled questions and create problems. Then the interviewer may not tell you all the answers also correctly. He may not tell you the answers also. Then is this workshop interesting and useful? So this is also double-barreled question only, right? Double-barreled question only, and again closed-ended. Is this workshop interesting and useful? Double-barreled as well as closed-ended. No, you have to choose only this out of this two. And double-barreled also. I'm not asking is this workshop interesting. Number one, is this workshop useful? So instead of a double-barreled is this workshop interesting and useful? So these type of questions, right? These type of questions. You see, you just put those questions only when it is required. Otherwise, try to avoid the double-barreled questions. So then, do respondents have information to answer the question? So this is also very, very important, right? So many times they will not be knowing, and still will be asking them. And you should be knowing. You should first know for whom you are asking the question, and whether you should ask them the question. So you should be writing not applicable. Otherwise, simply asking many questions doesn't make any sense, right? Doesn't make any such sense. So, and many times, that will have its impact on the further questions also. If you feel awkward, if you feel, awkward, and if you may not feel, okay, this fellow is asking me so many unnecessary things, let me not answer this. Or he's asking too much, then also he may not answer. So, and you should be always very, whoever goes to collect the data, right? Whoever goes to collect the data, the questionnaire, he should be trained. That's the first minimum thing that which should be always done. Otherwise, it will be a problematic thing. So then, another important thing is question significant, sufficiently general? So too much of generalization, right? Do you want recent behavior or typical behavior? Based on all this, you should frame your questions, right? You should first ask yourself, and based on your objectives, then you should put these questions in your things. And then whether the reply is with general attitude or for the specific part. How do you feel that this government is performing? How do you rate this government? This is specific, right, to this individual. Or if you ask, how is that, you and your friends are feeling about this government, whether they are performing well, general, trying to get the general attitude. So be very clear what is that you are trying to get the answer, right? Whether you want the general attitude answer or a specific answer. So, and then is your, be in the question itself, it should not be loaded with the biasness, right? The content itself, it should not be biased. We should not tell to them, yeah, the present webinar series is too good. Don't you think so? If this is the question, then it is loaded, right? It is biased. It is loaded as well as it is biased. So you give them the open-ended at that point of time. Then are subjects willing to answer? Yeah, many times, they are not willing to answer, but still we keep on asking them because it is there on the questionnaire. No, that is also very important. So whether they will be willing to answer these type of questions, how much of gold, we also have that in our questionnaire when we did the agrarian prices. About the income and wealth, we had the gold also. Many were unwilling to answer, right? Many. So first, in the pilot study itself, we understood, how much of a gold. Then we removed it. Are subjects willing to answer? We understood no. Regarding the gold, they're not willing to answer. But totally we were able to ask, how much of total assets, how much of wealth, what's the value of your entire wealth? Then he would say in between 10,000 and 15,000. Yes, 10,000. So instead of it, if I ask you how many grams of gold you have, 10 grams of gold, 5 grams of gold, 15 grams of gold, then unnecessarily, that will create lots of issues. So that is also, we should also try understand whether the subjects will be willing to answer when we will be writing that in the questionnaire itself. So then can these responses be compared with the existing information? This is also another important thing. Can these responses be compared with the existing information, or whether we should not, or whether this is something unique? Because many questionnaires, many studies are already done. Can our responses be compared with them? So think on all this, right? And so prepare it in such a way, and then prepare your questionnaire. And even in the wordings also, it should be 1.5 hours. Okay, I'll take a little more. So will words be uniformly understood? Means what do we mean by that? It should be of a simple language. It should be of a simple language. You should not put too many technical phrases. You should not put too many jargons, abbreviations in the questionnaires, right? The questions should adequately express the alternative, right? That is also very important. Does the question adequately express the alternatives also? Or whether it is misleading, if the question itself is misleading, or whether it's a wording biased uh, due to emotional or slanted, will wording be objectionable to the respondents? So these are the issues that which we should be very, very careful, right? We should be very careful. So what we should do, one is let the questionnaire be very simple. You let it use very simple language, right? Let it be adequately expressing the alternatives. Let it not mislead. Let it not be biased. Let the wordings not be objectionable, right? Let it not be too much of personalized, and ask in more direct or more indirect way. That few questions can be asked directly and few questions you cannot ask directly. As I was telling you, how much of gold do you have? Then he will ask, why do you need that? I'll not tell you. So these are the issues, right? These are the issues. So which question should be asked directly? So you can always ask, what's your personal income, or what is the annual income of your household, right? What is the total wealth of your family? Then you may say, is it in between this 1 lakh and 2 lakh, 2 lakh to 3 lakh, 4 lakh to 5 lakh? Then he will say, okay, yeah, that is fair enough. So that is how exactly, wordings also matters. Then sequencing of the question, sequencing of the question is also very important, right? Sequencing of the question is also very important. One question should lead to the another question. It should go in the natural flow. It should create an interest, right? Even the interviewee should feel an interest, right? It should improve the response rate. All of a sudden, you ask something, you ask about the demographic profile, and you go to the economic profile. Then you ask the sociologic, then you go for the behavior. No, you should not, don't jump, go in a sequential order, right? One question here, one question there. First, complete all the demographic profile, right? Then create some feel factor, good feel factor with the interviewee. Then you go with the sociological aspects, then go with the economic factors. Then he will feel also comfort. That comfort zone will be already developed. Then we can start with one. Then we can go with that. So then improve the response. There will be response also will be good. And and few times few places we have to skip the questions also. So that also you should teach it to the one who collects the data for you. Say, for example, this is the one that which really happened, and I'm telling you this. When I was assistant director, that's how I started my career. assistant director of economics and statistics, which I resigned and came to the university after working for around 1.5 years or so at the government. So when I was working there, this was the when they trained us, when they were giving the training, this is what the director of that day told me. So this is the practical thing that which they happened, and there was a sequencing of the questions, right? They sent the because usually this director of economics and statistics will train the enumerators, and the enumerators will go and collect the data. So they were given the questionnaire, they were asked to collect the data. So the question address, usually it will be, as I told you, the demographic profile will be initially. It will be always there in the first. So your household, right? Whether BPL, APL, how many members of your there? Are you married, right? What's your name? Are you married? How many children? How many male? How many female children? Okay, so this was a routine kind of a thing. An enumerator went in and he asked, "Are you, all this first three questions have happened, and then he asked the fourth question, are you married?" Then, the respondent lady said, "No, I'm not married." Then he asked, next question was, "What is your husband wife name?" Right? That was the next question. The next question is, "What is your husband?" And she again told, "I'm not married." How many children? Then imagine, right? What would have been the stage? She slapped and went off. So this is what our director, right, the DS was telling us. No, you should be sensitive, right? You should know when to skip and which question, is not applicable to them. So that also you should train them, right? You should also train and send the enumerators who go to collect the data. That's why I said at least 1/3 you collect the data by yourself, right? Researchers should collect the data by himself, and along with it, he should take few enumerators and train them and then send them. So that is always a safe way of collecting the data. Then the most common problems in the questionnaire design is lack of specificity. It should indicate the time frame. Many of us, when we ask the questions, will not ask in whether it is you're asking the salary of a month or of that of the annual income, or of the month, or of the income of the month, or income of the year. So all this should be very clear, right? Whether you are speaking specified, whether you are specified the day or week or month, whether you are asking it in the rupees, or what's the value in which you are asking, whether you're asking, what's the output, either it in terms of the rupees or in terms of kgs. You should be very specific when you are asking the question. So indicate the time frame, indicate the value in which you want to get the answer. And if at all, if you don't do it, then there will be a problems, right? So that is most important thing. For example, how many days of leisure you get in a day? How many hours of leisure do you get in a day? How many hours of leisure you get in a week? So are you asking of a week or a day? At least if you ask for a day and you say it's a day, you can make it to the week. If you want it for a week, and if you're not specifying, and if you're saying some number, you will not be knowing whether it's for a week or whether it is for a day. So that you should be very clear. So that is the reason that by specificity is also very important thing. Then not using filter branches, branch contingency questions for questions that may not apply to all subjects. Sometimes I told you, few it is not required, right? Few it doesn't require. Even then we'll be asking them the questions. When they say we are not, the individual respondent is not married, then you should not ask them, what is their hubby name, or how many children and all. Similarly, if at all, if the question is, do you stay overnight when you go for a tour? If you say no, I'll never be staying out, then never ask the question, where do you stay, in which lodge will you stay? Specifically, the respondent has already answered he will never stay overnight. When he's saying that he will never stay overnight, never keep on asking. There may be subsequent questions, but you write NEA and just move ahead. So these are the issues that which we should teach. We should train the one who go, right, who go and collect the data. And then use of technical terms or complex languages, that is also very important. If they don't know what is WB, what is ADA, what is N, what is GDP, what is GNP. So if they don't know, and you're putting in these jargons and telling the technical terms and asking them to answer, then also it won't work. And ask the questions which they can answer, right? You should not say them, what was your income in 1990? Or if you ask a farmer, what was your income in 1990? Or how many quintals of rice you were growing in 1990? Think whether he can answer that question, right? So when you are framing your questionnaire design itself, see that which he cannot answer. Just thinking, okay, I just want to compare it with the pre-economic reforms period, that is before 1991, and I will be asking some question to him whether he will be able to recall it. That is also an important thing. Instead of it, you can always ask, whether your income has increased relatively to the pre-reform period. That you can always ask. And moreover, for whom you will be asking that question, that is also important. If you ask a farmer who is just 25 years old, I've been, when I'll be evaluating some research projects, will also be coming for evaluation. Many times they'll be evaluating the pre-economic reform period with that of the post-economic reform period. But the respondent's age will be 25 years, 30 years. So it means to say economic reforms were introduced 25 years back, means at least that respondent should be 50 years now. Otherwise, you should not ask that question to that particular individual. So these are the issues, right? One is questionnaire design, another one is who are the respondents. So, and trying to handle complex matters. I did mention about this double-barreled questions. Try to avoid them because it is not required at many places. So wherever it is necessary, then you can always use them. It is always better to break the questions into smaller one and ask them. But in few places it is required, then only whenever you feel you don't have any other option, only then you put the double-barreled questions. Otherwise, it's better you cut the questions into three different questions and ask them the questions. And how we'll be using the questionnaire together, whether by observation, physical instruments, all these things are also there, or from the available records. So all this is very important, right? How exactly we use the questionnaire, whether which tool we are using, whether we are using the observation method or whether we are using the physical instruments, or whether we are. So all this has to be kept in mind while preparing the questionnaire design. And the most common problems, right? The most common problems in the continuation of that implied. Yes. So question wordings is over. Yeah, sequencing is done. Most common problems, lack of specificity. Yeah. Then implied alternatives. So state, do you feel authorities should charge rupees 25 or the entrance to the zoo, or it should be the free of charge? When you should not give everything, wherever it is required, it is fine. Otherwise, don't give the statements like this. You need this answer. You need only two answers, whether it should be rupees 25 or it should be free, free of cost to the zoo. So don't give the implied alternatives also. This is a common problem that which many will do, or unstated assumption. So how far did you drive to reach the park? So it assumes that the subject is always driving by a car or a two-wheeler. So don't say that. How far did you drive to reach? You first ask them, how did you reach this place? Whether you use the public transport, whether you walk to this place. Then only you ask, how far did you reach? If you say if it is a car or a two-wheeler, then you can always ask this. So then the frame of reference, this is also very important, particularly important when asking for the attitudes or evaluation. This also is very important. So these are the examples, right? The examples which have been given here. So how exactly the questions can be framed when the demographic and socio-economic characteristics, behavior, attitudes. So after that, say a simple questions like, how old are you? So in what country is your permanent residence? You mention here and then country, how much money did you spend on this trip? So simple. So let the questions be simple, and you see where it should be open-ended, where it should be close-ended. So only then your questionnaire you will be getting the good data. Otherwise, you will not be getting the good data from your questionnaires. So open-ended. To avoid to the leading, how exactly we will be doing this. What is your primary reason for visiting the park today? This is an open-ended question, right? What's your primary reason for visiting the park today? We are not saying, oh, did you visit the park for walking? It's a closed-ended. What's your primary reason for visiting the park today? It's an open-ended question. Then, if you are saying partially closed-ended, right? Partially closed-ended, also we have given the examples, right? Which of the following community recreation facilities do you frequently use? Right? Neighborhood parks, swimming pools, tennis courts, out of which one they will answer. And say, if you allow the subject to check multiple responses, categories exhaustively and mutually exclusively, which of the following winter recreational activities have you participated in during the past month? So check all that apply. So whether they may say one or three, one or four, all that they will check and they will put. So in the Likert scale, in the Likert scale, whether strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly agree. So here it is, they will be saying, to what extent they are satisfied. You can put it accordingly, whether you want strongly agree or you want to put as satisfied, most satisfied, like that. You can change it accordingly, even the Likert scale also. So downhill skating is exciting, is dangerous, is expensive. Based on that, they will say whether they will strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly agree. So this is strongly disagree. So based on this also you can have it, but you be very clear in what you are trying to get. So based on that, you prepare your question as. So rank ordering to measure the preferences, priorities, that also you should be doing it, right? And say you are placing, what is your most important interest to travel to which of the destination for the summer vacation. So you're giving the three choices. So one, two, three, or if you want to be open-ended, right? Open-ended and leave it, and then tell them, which is the most likely visit of you in the vacation, and next likely visit, next like that also you can ask. So if you want to rank ordering it, then give all these states or give the most important states that which there will be more tourist destination, and and you can also put others if at all, if there are maybe some who may be willing to go to Maharashtra or Punjab also. If you feel these are the three most important states with the travel, there may be some others. For that, you can also give others, or you just make it an open-ended question also. So that is also there. And but if for the rank ordering, you have to give, and for which you can either give all the 29 states, or give the most important states based on the most tourist attractive places. So then filter the questions, right? Filter the questions. A few questions. Did you stay overnight on your most of the recent trips? No or yes. If yes, how many nights did you spend away from the home? If he is saying no, then this question doesn't come. So filter the questions there and there itself, and then move forward. So these are the issues that which each one of us should keep in the mind. And one more thing I'll say, and I'll complete today's lecture. And some examples like which are bad questions which we should avoid, right? Which you should avoid is too much of loaded questions. Say most people are stitching to some brand, right? Most people are stitching to brand X. Have you switched it? So don't ask these type of questions, right? Don't ask these type, because it's your biasness that you are feeling that somebody is shifting towards the brand X, and you are asking, why you are not shifting it, when you are shifting it. All these type of questions we should not ask. So we can always ask them, which is the brand that which you are using. So that will be the answer. And then what's your opinion about, if you want to know about the brand X, you can always ask, what's your opinion about the brand X in the next question. So then try to avoid this, right? Try to avoid the double barrel questions and use them only when it is required. So do you use the city parks or recreation centers? So, and should Lisbon build a new baseball stadium by raising taxes, or a cricket stadium by raising the taxes? So these kinds of things, right, or the double barrel questions, see where you can use them, and not and try to be very specific, and try to put only those questions, right? Try to put only those questions which the subject is able to answer, right? Say I'll be asking him, putting it in the, say I will be asking him, do you think ADA has been effective? First, you should know whether he knows what is ADA, right? The individuals with, right, with disabilities, if you want to say about that. So if you first should know what do you mean by ADA, what do you mean by IMF, what do you mean by World Bank. First you should know about that. Only then you should ask that question. Otherwise, it becomes a very difficult for him, and that individual also will feel I don't know this. He'll not be asked. If at all, if he doesn't ask you, then he will say yes or no, and that answer will not be the correct one. So that is the reason. And so you should be asking the questions in such a way that the subject or the respondent will be able to answer. It should be very simple, and it should not be very sensitive. Also, the question should not be very sensitive. So if you are doing it on the social empowerment or women empowerment, and if you are doing a questionnaire, if you're asking the hubbies, how many times do you beat wife? These type of sensitive questions one should not ask. Instead, they can always ask a woman, is domestic violence prevalent? Right? Is domestic violence prevalent? What are the different forms of domestic violence that which you are encountered with? So this is the time. And or if you are doing a study on the pickpocketers or the juvenile offenders, you cannot ask them how many have you committed a crimes last week. This that is not on juvenile. You cannot ask them for juvenile or any when you are studying on these type of things. Instead, you can ask how did you come to this field? When was that? At what age? What made you to become like this? How many times you started? So like this, it should be. Don't ask the sensitive questions, right? See that you reframe that questions and do ask them. So with this, probably I took a little extra also. Sorry for that. So with this, I will end today's session. So I thank the SSMRB College organizers for giving me the opportunity, for giving me this opportunity to share, to discuss my views, right? To discuss my views on a few areas of the research methodology. Hope you have enjoyed it, understood it. If you have understood it, you will definitely would have enjoyed it. Yeah, both are closed-ended one, but I'm asking you, hope you are. That is the important thing. So thank you. Thanks a lot for your patience listening. I thank the college management, principal, HOD, and all the organizers, right, for giving me this opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. That was very informative session. In-depth insights of all the things which we have discussed, which you have discussed today with us, is very informative, sir. Thank you so much. There are certain couple of questions, sir. Shall I ask you from the
Yeah, sure.
participants?
Sure, sure.
Okay. Sir, one of the participant, Rohini Kalish, asks that, can we give the details of the author in the preferences instead of footnotes?
Hindi?
Can we give the details of the author in the preferences instead of footnotes?
What is preferences?
Oh, sorry, references.
Yeah.
It means to say.
Yeah, they can give, right. Either you can give it in the references or in the footnote. Both are almost the same. If you're doing the footnotes, then you will not be doing it in the references. One of it will be there. Both will not be there in the study, right? You will be in the footnote itself. If you are giving all the author's name, then you will not be doing the references. It's almost a repetition. So they will not usually do it. So either do footnote or do the references. One of it is ideal.
Okay, so one more question from Usha Lakshmi S. So she's asking about, should we decide on the analysis tool first and then design the questionnaire as per the suitability of data analysis?
No, when you do the review of literature, you get a fair amount of idea. That's what I was telling you. First, don't be conclusive. First, don't go with the tool. First, think about the research gap. Based on that, that you will be identifying based on the review of literature. There would be many studies already done. Their strengths also you would know, their weakness also you would know. Study on that particular tool. You will be knowing what are the strengths of that particular tool, what are the weaknesses of that particular tool. Based on that, then you decide whether you should go for this tool or not. Otherwise, doing the reverse engineering will not help. So it start from the review of the literature, then go with this, then identify the tool, right? Then identify the tool and then do the questionnaire.
Okay, so thank you so much for your valuable time and knowledgeable resources and your talk. I hand it over to Lavanya ma'am to give vote of thanks.
Yeah. Dear all, I, Lavanya, on behalf of SSMRV College, extend my sincere thanks to resource person Dr. Keshav sir for sharing valuable inputs on research. Today, we had an opportunity to hear you, sir. Your thoughts have enlightened our minds. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank all participants for their active participation throughout the session. I thank our management for providing opportunity to organize this workshop. I express my deepest sense of gratitude to our principal, Dr. Anil Kumar sir, for his able guidance and continuous support in all our endeavors. I would like to acknowledge gratitude to Dr. Nagraj sir, Head, Department of Commerce, IQAC Coordinator, and Gokul sir, IQAC member, convener of the workshop, Shalini ma'am, co-convener, Ellappa sir, and the entire organizing team for their contribution in organizing this workshop. Kind attention participants, for tomorrow's session, material and links will be shared in the group. Kindly join tomorrow's session 5 minutes before the schedule. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keshav sir, and thank you to all the participants. So tomorrow will be day 3, and we will meet up. So in case any updates are there, we will keep you updated. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening. I request the participants to exit the meeting.